it's very hard to get around this debate still between like cyber optimism and cyber pessimism. And when you read these books by the optimists, the key examples like Henry Jenkins or Clay Shirky and those, most of these writers tend to have a section in their books when they say there's also a dark side to the internet, and then they move on with their general perspective still. So I guess if one would challenge writers like that, they would say, but I included that. I am critical, but maybe they're not critical in the sense that you suggest. So what is lacking in those perspectives, you think?
I mean, I think on the one hand, I think the important thing is like the overall perspective and to what you dedicate most of your own research time and most of the pages in your writing. And of course, it's more complicated than that. That, for example, Henry Jenkins in his latest book also acknowledges the existence of the phenomenon of digital labor, but then he takes a different perspective on it also. Yeah.
So which book is that? Is that Spreadable Media? It's a newer one.
No, it's the one on Spreadable Media discusses digital labor. To a certain extent. So he acknowledges, one must say, that people like Mark Andreevich, myself, and others have done work on these issues where we are quite skeptical, you could say. So he mentions these issues, but also he takes another perspective there. But I think the important thing on the question of techno-optimism, techno-pessimism is that neither being a pure optimist nor being a pure pessimist means critical, because what for me sometimes criticism is being conceived as being skeptical and questioning everything, but that's the most general Socratic way of how you can define being critical. But for me, critical means dialectical critique. So you are looking for the contradictions when you look at social media or digital media and their role in society. And given that we live in a society that is full of conflicts of interests, which are contradictions, it's very likely that you can also observe these contradictions when studying digital media. And so I think like a guideline for doing critical media research, which for me is the same as critical, is to try to identify whatever phenomenon you are studying, to ask yourself, what are the conflicts of interest here, and what are the power structures involved? And the power structure is always a relation between two or more groups with contradictory interests.
So you mean you wouldn't? So then we would be wrong to say that techno-pessimism or cyber-pessimism is the same as a critical perspective, according to you, because you think that the critical perspective is the compromise or the middle ground.
No, there have been historically, if you look at the theory and philosophy of technology, there have been very skeptical approaches that are a kind of cultural conservative position on culture and technology. I mean, on the internet, you can find all these perspectives. For example, in cyber psychology, these assumptions we spend too much time on the internet, on social media, it makes us silly. The language of young people is degrading, our brains are shrinking, and so on. So I would say that's a skeptical position, but I would not say it's critical. Sometimes it's just anti-technology, and sometimes it's anti-young people who are using these technologies, or even psychoanalytically. Sometimes it's like the parent generation cannot control what the young people are doing on the internet, so they project their fears into a kind of techno-skepticism, and arguing that young people are at risk using all these media. There are criminals and sexual predators around, and so on. And this is, being critical about this question is that you would then study this phenomenon and ask yourself, what's the power relationship between the young people and their parents? This tells you much more. It would not mean it's not a critical question to ask to ask yourself, why does the internet make us silly and so on? Because it doesn't. It's not the internet and so on. Yeah? So techno-skepticism can also be non-critical and can also be quite deterministic, actually.
Yeah, I agree, and I think it's a good point. So, and in your book, you also draw these connections, which is very, very good for us in a sociology course, to the classics. You, of course, the Marxist perspective and the Frankfurt School, obviously, but also to Tönnies and Durkheim and Weber and so on. So, I mean, that's a crucial point, to make sure that even though we're studying new phenomena, we shouldn't necessarily invent new theories for everything. But do you think most of these perspectives can be quite easily translated, or what do you feel must be what are they lacking, these perspectives? Is there a need for developing new dimensions to those theories?
Well, if I would be very rude and critical of the field of internet research, then I would say that it's completely positivist and it lacks any form of engagement with philosophy and theory. And as good as it gets in terms of theory and philosophy is debates about ethics, about privacy, and the Association for Internet Researchers develops its ethics guidelines and so on. But it does not properly theorize the internet and the internet's role in society. Yeah, I mean, and might also be, it might be a bit unfair to say, but it might be that within the internet research, I think there's a strong Anglo-American tradition in it.
But you're right. There is,
was always much more positivist and lacked the more engagement with continental philosophy. Yeah? And so I'm interested in how continental philosophy and social theory in general, and critical theory in particular, can help us understanding what is going on and how the internet and society are developing. Yeah? And now, of course, and then, I mean, I would make an argument for the Frankfurt School and critical theory and going back to Marx and so on. Apart from that, I think I would also make the general point, we need any form of social theory is relevant for better understanding the internet. And then the question of the new and the old in terms of social theory also comes up. Yeah? So one position would be to say these developments in society and in the media landscape are so new, we need radical new theories. The other position might be to say we still live in a either modern society or capitalist society, so we need modern theories or critical theories of society that we then apply. How I think of it is, again, dialectically in terms of just like society develops historically, which means we should also think of theory historically, which means that if, on the one hand, society structures of modernity and capitalism are still around, so when we now theorize a particular phenomenon, it makes sense to go to theorists who understood capitalism and modernity, but then society also develops through, or contradictory societies also develop through phases and crises and so on, which is why their foundational structures also change. So it's kind of dialectic of continuity and change. So when I go to Marx, I'm interested in how Marx begins his analysis is that he asks the question, what is the commodity form, and how does the commodity form look like? And certainly, wherever there is capitalism, there is commodity production. But now, on social media, commodity form takes on a very strange and peculiar form. One we in this form, with targeted advertising and so on, that we have not seen it exactly like this before. We have seen so-called audience commodity in terms of newspapers and broadcasting, where you also have a strange form of commodity, but now it's a user-generated data commodity. This has not existed before, but still it's a commodity. So we need theories that help us understand the commodity form, at the same time also to understand what is new about the commodity form. So for me, this means the perspective for me of like digital Marxism, where we build on the vocabulary of Marxist theory and political economy of communication, but then also add something new to it. So it's neither old nor new. It's both at the same time.
I don't know if you write very much about it in your book, but you've been talking about the need for a public service internet.
Yeah.
How would you explain the point in having such a system, like we have had in Sweden or the UK with state television, that we could have a state internet, and that would protect the internet maybe from commercialization and some forms of surveillance? Do you think that model would work?
So I do not. In the book, I think in the second edition that is forthcoming, there's something on it in like the conclusion, but in the first edition you don't find it there. But where I talked about it was my inaugural lecture.
I was there. Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I think it's printed in CCC and also reprinted in the book Culture and Economy in the Age of Social Media. And I think we have a strong public service tradition in Europe in general, which makes the European media landscape very different from the American media landscape. However, the internet originated in the US, and the platforms are being dominated by Silicon Valley corporations that are for-profit corporations. And what the European Union, has tried to do with the Lisbon agenda was that they were arguing until 2010, Europe should become, how was it formulated, the most advanced and most competitive information society and economy in the world. So their strategy was we do our own Silicon Valley, we will have our own Google, Microsoft, Facebook and Twitter and so on. But it completely failed. They have not acknowledged it that it failed, because just in terms of internet platforms, there is nothing. There's nothing. It's all Californian models and so on. So, but I don't think they have rethought the strategy enough, because there might be a reason why it does not work to import this model into Europe. And my argument is, so I think that it's harmful in many respects that we only have for-profit corporations dominating internet platforms, but also internet infrastructure, all levels of the internet. It results in high-level centralization and so on. But there are different forms you can organize media. And there's the capitalist commodity form on the one end. There's public service, and then there's civil society media, and Wikipedia and free software and so on are examples for civil society media, digital media. We have very few examples of how public service digital media or public service internet could look like. But given that the tradition is strong in Europe, I could imagine that a network of public service broadcasters, public service media companies in Europe could really make a difference. So if you think, for example, of public service television, they have massive archives, really, all of them. Sweden, SVT, Britain, BBC, Germany, ARD, ZDF. I come from Austria, there it's ORF and all the other ones. So if you would now think of that, where they could, for example, be very strong is if they would start an alternative YouTube, a public service YouTube, as a kind of project run by all these European public service broadcasters together, and they already have material for it that could be digitized. If they would, only if it would be their news and debate programs, documentaries, if they would put all this stuff with Creative Commons licenses not on YouTube, but on their own version of YouTube, people could reuse it and so on. I think this would be a very powerful platform and would attract lots of users. But I think what keeps us from, and I think in terms of, for example, a kind of user-generated video platform and so on, a parallel to YouTube would be a good example. I do not think that public service internet should be done in all realms. So I would have more concerns if it would be something like Facebook and so on. Because on Facebook, lots of personal data are being used. And it's not. We cannot say that something. The BBC and public service broadcasters, they are independent organizations. So it's not. They are not state controlled or state institutions. But still, they are closer to the state. That's why some people would have concerns about a public service Facebook. But with something like YouTube, it might work.
You had this example when you say, if we look at YouTube as an example, most of the content there is produced by transnational media corporations So that could be an argument that the majority activity on YouTube is not like user-generated content. It's rather things that are produced like it was in a society that was dominated by mass media rather than social media. So, but then like this idea then of the long tail, he says that, well, this long tail still enables lots of niche interests to flourish and so on. Do you think they're unimportant, or what would you say about that balance?
Well, I think how it is changing is that we must distinguish between different types of users on something like YouTube. Yeah? And to a certain, I mean, one part of it is a kind of just extension of mass media and broadcasting, namely when mass media organizations take parts of their programs and also put it on YouTube. Yeah? Most of them do, at least parts of the content. And this content tends to be very popular, tends to be highly viewed, and also to have lots of followers and so on. Yeah, but the average YouTube user, does not have his or her own channel, does not produce a lot of content. However, they like watching different videos on YouTube. Yeah, but so I would say it's more, but it means it's a more active audience in the end. Yeah, and I would say it's a more interactive. It's like interactive television. Yeah, where you have a broad a broad archive to choose from. Yeah, and I think that's probably the predominant form of. So it's more a more active use than television. Yeah, where you have some channels. Here you have many channels, and you choose from it. However, the smallest number of people become YouTubers. Yeah, who have their channel. Yeah, and regularly produce content. Yeah, and I do not deny that there is this potential for user-generated content production. What I'm saying is it's a very small share of the overall of the overall users. Yeah. At the same time, I mean, with the long tail, if you're asking about that, of course, it's true that still even the group of the small, relatively small share of YouTubers who produce also lots of content, but some of them reach like a huge audience. Most of them reach a small audience. Yeah, but I have not done calculations. If you would sum up all of their views, if it could be larger than the views of the 10,000 most popular commercial channels. Yeah. But another point of critique comes in, which is also that you fragment the public also. So of course you have like niche publics, special interest publics that form on YouTube, that form on the internet. It's also good that they can form, like fan communities and so on. But I just think from the perspective, and what I'm interested in is the perspective of political communication. So the problem is in a fragmented public, it also becomes difficult that people talk to each other. Also those people who do not share like special interests, and people who for example disagree. And I think that is what I'm interested in social media use. I mean, and video on the one hand, but maybe also something like Twitter on the other hand, how it could be developed from being a fragmented niche public. I mean, you could even say it's almost a kind of a geek public. Towards a larger public sphere. That also is not completely top down, but that enables to be fed bottom up, really. So where there is still user generated content and communication and interaction and debate going on, but something that reaches large numbers in terms of people, maybe beyond the nation state. This would be the advantage, because television, by and large, is confined to the nation state. So I mean, and even if we would have to look even closer at the long tail, and you then have to look at how do the power structures look within the long tail, because it's not clear that all those who produce within the long tail are just the everyday users, hobbyists, and so on. It could be that it's quite a lot of businesses that are also there that in some way or another try to make money, but somehow it fails. It's not that successful. So I think we still need to look into the power structures within the long tail also. It's not that clear that they are all hobbyists and so on.
No, and of course you're right that it's very like compartmentalized also. It's not necessarily like as some writers would have it, that it seems like you could mobilize them all if you wanted to, because they're not interconnected in that way, I think.
Yeah, there's no way how you can reach all of them suddenly.
No.
I mean, if you...
Even though they do somehow similar things, they're not like networked on the larger level, really.
It's true. I mean, this would maybe be another idea, just if one starts from redesigning what already exists. I mean, to find some form of aggregation that allows all, I mean, people who are interested in the same topic, but who have diverse point of views, to bring them together. But maybe this would have to be another type of platform, that, for example, always brings together on political topics, for example, videos that have very opposing points of views, and then invites the audience to comment. So in the end, this critique with the internet developing into a kind of a filter bubble, where people talk to like-minded people. To a certain extent, that is true, and maybe we should try to find ways of how to break it open. At the same time, when you try to break it open, there's also a danger in it. I'm especially thinking of Twitter, because I mean Twitter is much more anonymous than a video you post yourself on YouTube, where you can see your image and so on, although also on YouTube you can post anonymously. I mean, anonymous communication also invites hate speech, which does not mean that hate speech automatically develops, but it's just that Habermas, these conditions of communicative, with the validity claims of communicative actions he identifies, are much harder to obtain in online communication than in offline communication, when we sit on the table and look into each other's eyes. And especially, I mean, if you don't see each other, then it gets difficult. And even on Skype, like we are doing now, you cannot look the other person properly into the eyes, because then I have to look up into my camera, really. So I think it makes a difference in which there's a bias that online communication is more effective, more emotional, that you start calling people by names easier and quicker than offline, and so on. So still, if you encourage diverse online debates where people meet that disagree, you still need to find some form of safeguarding, that it does not immediately evolve in some form of online role and hate speech and so on. It's always a certain danger, because of course people with diverse viewpoints meet on Twitter, and sometimes the outcome is hate speech.
Because that's what's been talked about as the online disinhibition effect, basically, that there are lots of things about this barrier that the digital is with, that it's not synchronized and it's not embodied in the same way as like offline face-to-face meetings. So that means that some thresholds for social behavior are lowered, which can be both good and bad, of course.
And I think there's also like what some people in a more polemical way call GODWIN'S law, that says that when the longer an online discussion goes on, the larger the likelihood that someone uses a comparison involving Hitler, Nazis, fascism, and so on. So it approaches one the longer the discussion goes on. Which is too polemical, I think, because we cannot assume that all people are just irrational, and completely emotional in online discussions, and resort to swearing and so on. But I think what it indicates is it happens much easier online than offline, that people swear at each other and so on, because because on the one hand there's a kind of spatial temporal distance. On the other hand, there's also a kind of more emotional distance, because that's what the internet, with Skype and like video and so on, that's again different than just with text-based communication. But even Skype cannot properly communicate affects and emotions. So it's still, if we think of like a long-distance relationship, where a couple only sees each other all 3 months and they communicate constantly by Skype. They see each other. They might say "I love you" and so on. But saying "I love you" via Skype is very different than saying it when you're sitting in the same room.
And it's also different doing it in writing or with an emoji and so on. So it's
it's one way how you express emotions, but it's new challenges that have emerged in this respect.
I have two concepts that I want to bring up. The first one is this notion of play labor, because if you just take it at sort of face value, it's like, well, people do stuff online that are playful, that can be fun. Maybe you create a blog or you click around on YouTube and you do stuff. But this play also has an element of labor where you generate profits or you generate value for capitalists, basically. And one way of relating to this for the user would be that, well, as long as I have fun, it doesn't matter that it's labor. So what would you say, like, should people stop engaging in these forms of play once they realize that it's also labor and go to seek out other platforms, or can this play and labor coexist?
Well, I think that the emergence of play labor, it's not just something that happens online. It's a broader tendency within the development of capitalism. And so lots of, on the one hand, lots of people seek like even jobs that are playful, and where they can be creative and so on. So that's not a bad thing. The bad thing is that companies tend to use people because the work is creative, it's fun, and so on. So that new forms of alienation then emerge. So a good example is just work in the creative industries. Why are people interested in working in media, arts, design, creativity, and so on? They like the jobs. They like to have the feeling that these activities are self-fulfilling and so on. However, what has now come along with these new forms where labor is self-determined, is a form of creativity, is play, and so on, is that the boundary between leisure time and labor time has been blurred, and so it's very hard to draw a distinction between it. And some people then, for example, feel, well, it's a pressure. It's like an always online culture that has developed, where you can never get away from work. So work is always present, but it's creative and it's playful work and so on. It's not necessarily a bad thing as such. It's a bad thing if it's being in a professional context misused by corporations and by management in order to make people produce ever more surplus value, without increasing their wages. So there's lots of there's a good book that like an American journalist has written. It's called Shadow Work. There's lots of work that we conduct where we do not realize that it is work. And now if we come to the online platforms and so on, let's say YouTube again. Of course, when you produce like a YouTube video, it might be it's fun for you, or you are a video blogger and so on. You reach out to a small community. Maybe, and you feel satisfied by being accepted within this community. At the same time, of course, YouTube earns money with you. And the question would then be, I would not say that we should stop using the platforms, because this would be silly. It's like some kind of Luddite position. I think we should demand a wage for the play labor that we always conduct, which would just mean that when YouTube makes profits by inserting annoying advertising messages into my videos, then they should pay me a share from what they earn from it. And of course, to a certain extent, this is happening already now. I think with YouTube Red, I think in Europe it has not been rolled out, but in the US, which is like a partnership program, but it's unfair. It's like class divided. Very popular YouTubers that have a huge amount of followers, YouTube might choose to offer them to become part of this program, where they offer specially produced content, and people then pay, I think, a subscription fee, and the YouTuber gets part of the subscription fee, which would mean they earn a wage then by it, but still it's in a direct form then also exploitation in monetary terms, because YouTube earns a kind of profit, just for enabling the platform. So I think I would even say it's not a bad thing that people want to turn online platforms even into a living. I mean, the idea that I live from a blog, or from some platform that or content that I produce and that I'm good at. Everyone can understand that, because it's again like the desire to do a work and to live from a work that you think is self-fulfilling. But what you must then realize is that if you're like, let's say you are a relatively successful YouTuber, you can, with some product placements and so on, you can live from it. But still, what you must see is that others. You are working, but others are also making money by it, which are the advertisers then, in the end, and which is a platform like YouTube itself, which is why these freelancers, in my opinion, they are also wage workers then in the end, because they always depend on others. But the problem is that, I mean, the whole way how class structures have changed, how the world of labor has changed, is actually fairly complex. And of course, there is a tendency that many people working in digital and media creative industries are freelancers nowadays. And it's even, I think there is a kind of inequality within this class of freelancers. There are a tiny few who become celebrities, and can more or less live from being the YouTuber online celebrity, but then there's the large class of proletarianized YouTubers and online creatives who try to earn a living. They would also like to be celebrities, but giving the online attention is also limited. Only some of them will make it. So there's a very stratified online attention economy. Also in respect who can be an online creative celebrity and who is an online creative proletarian who can hardly make a living. I mean, how to get around this question is the general question of under the dominant neoliberal form of governmentality, lots of people are doing precarious work, and lots of it does not feel like precariousness. It feels like it's fun and play and so on. The point is not to question the creativity and the playfulness, but to turn it into ways where people can lead decent lives, and are not working poor, basically. Lots of young people nowadays are working poor. And how you solve it, in my opinion, is via, for example, the introduction not just of minimum wages, or not just the idea of wages for YouTube and Facebook, also the idea of a guaranteed basic income that is funded out of capital taxation. I think for artists and creatives, a basic income guarantee would actually be a big help. Because even if we just think of like people who are, I don't know, they work in like theaters or as performance artists and so on. Lots of them are struggling too, and the reason why they might not even be using online platforms at all. Yeah, and why they are struggling is also that sources of public funding and of foundation, private civil society funding from foundations and so on has disappeared, and the idea that whenever we are creatives and working in cultural media industries, we should be entrepreneurial, that we are an entrepreneur of ourselves. I think that's a very damaging idea, because it feels like we are all entrepreneurial now, but in the end, it's a new form of a creative proletariat that has emerged that is struggling to get by, and then it's a few large companies earning still lots of money, and lots of people who are great people, have great ideas, but struggle to earn a living with it. So I think politics of basic income would be a way forward in the future.
Yeah, sure. And in the also from your book, in the chapter about where you write about Facebook, you write a lot about privacy, and I think that's been a huge debate, of course, and most people today know or have somehow realized or thought about the fact that both willingly and unwillingly we share a lot of stuff about ourselves on Facebook, and that it's potentially quite a dangerous system of surveillance. But one thing that I think is interesting is this concept of privacy fetishism that you write about, and that's something that's not really a characteristic of Facebook, but of perspectives on Facebook, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so could you explain that a bit?
Yes, so privacy is not a concept that has originated within critical theories. No. So you can hardly find critical theories of privacy. So it's a liberal concept, and some people even say that privacy is a concept that tends to advance possessive individualism, because there are ideas like financial privacy, that nobody should know how high the profits of a certain company are, and so on. So that's one kind of critique.
It's like the liberal idea of the integrity of the individual, basically.
Also, there was a feminist critique since the 1970s of privacy, that if privacy means privacy in the family, nobody knows what others are doing, then it can also shield and veil violence against women in the family. So surely the classical liberal concept of privacy, one should not fetishize it. And I think how sometimes now among privacy advocates or people who have conservative perspectives on the internet, they fetishize privacy and say that really the scandal on the internet is that people are making so much data available and are putting themselves at risk because it's a harm to their privacy, and thereby they could be attacked by criminals, online sexual predators, and so on. But I think that's really a conservative form of cultural skepticism and critique. That it's a critique of well, it would mean, if you think it to the end, it would mean we should shut off social media. So it's anti-social media, really. Because the reason why people are interested in social media is that this idea of revealing certain information about you is a mode of communication. It's an offer of communication. That there are pictures about people, videos that they make. So if all of this is invisible, actually, it's not an invitation for people to communicate. So on the one hand, how I would challenge privacy fetishism is that it's opposed to fostering online communication, something that I think should be very welcome. And it targets the wrong kind of enemy. It says that internet users are silly because they make so much information about themselves visible. I mean, it's a cultural thing that has emerged, especially among younger people now. They enjoy doing this. And it should be possible that they are doing it. However, where I think we should develop a critique is in terms of two forms of surveillance. Yeah? On the one is state surveillance of online data, as Edward Snowden has unveiled, and the other one is corporate surveillance by platforms and advertising agencies for making profits. Yeah? But here, I've done empirical studies about these things. Actually, the everyday internet user is fairly critical of both commercial surveillance and state surveillance on the internet. And the average user wishes that there is an internet and that there are platforms where there is no state surveillance and no corporate surveillance. The problem, however, is that there are these monopoly structures, where you don't have lots of alternatives. So we should not blame the users, really. We should blame the state and blame capitalism and blame the interconnection of state and capitalism, which you can, when it comes to the internet, which you can then call the emergence of a surveillance industrial internet complex. I mean, this whole thing with the Edward Snowden revelations, that's not in my social media book, because when I wrote it, it was before, it was before Snowden's revelations, which were made in June 2013. But I think in the second edition, like one whole chapter is now dedicated to Snowden and surveillance. And we must think of social media post-Snowden nowadays, really. And there, I think, privacy can also then be, or a critical privacy concept can then also be a powerful concept that can be a form of critique. But it should not. Basic point is, it should not be a critique of the users. It should be a critique of state institutions and corporations.